want to go ahead and wish you all a happy 4th of July as we are just one day here before. I am Chris Gros, joined as always here by Jack Hull. And Jack, we actually had some programming yesterday. We did not have the show yesterday. We made some changes. But one of the things that we wanted to do was have our Jenny Day on to discuss the Larry Millete trial now that it has officially, both sides have rested their cases. Now, we still have closing arguments to go on, but this was one that we are going to be having our Jenny Day here in just a couple of minutes here to go over her last filed report here so far.
Yeah.
But one that, again, we were just talking off camera, just kind of going over how it is that we want to structure things moving forward with other shows, because this has been such a big part of our content list, if you will. And we're already gearing up for, again, when a verdict is handed down, we want Jenny, we want Kelly in our show so that we can actually go ahead and really dive into the totality of this trial.
Oh yeah. I mean, 100%. It's not uncommon to have last minute scheduling changes or anything like that. So oftentimes it is one of those situations. It's like, okay, we'll just cover the stuff the next day. This was one of those days where we were kind of kicking ourselves because we were like, oh my goodness, this is the thing that we want to cover.
Yeah.
So Jenny usually comes in on Thursdays. We were able to make a last minute adjustment. We have her, like you mentioned, come in here in just a few minutes. We're obviously so excited for that because, like we said, both sides have rested their cases. We thought that it was going to be a 4 to 5 day period in which we saw the defense lay out their case. That was not the case. Yeah. It was 1 day only. It was only 2 real witnesses, 3 actually. And we'll obviously dive into that, the overall argument of the defense, and then a little bit of a recap as we kind of head out into the week, because we're going to get jury instruction on Monday. We're going to see closing arguments on Tuesday, and then it's up to the jury. It's deliberations. You and I were talking about how long, because of course we're planning ahead on our programming. We're talking about doing an overview once we hear the verdict. Now the question of planning comes into the equation, because we're like, okay, how long do we think this is going to take? And I'm certain that there's a swath of people that think this is an open and shut case. There's probably a lot of people on the fence. There's probably a lot of people who think, Larry is innocent or Larry is guilty. I don't think that. We've been posting this on YouTube, and we've seen lively discussion taking place here throughout the community. But I would say my biggest conclusion out of that is that this is not going to be an open and shut case when it comes to jury deliberations. There's a lot of people who have very strong opinions on it. Obviously, we are people who are ingesting the media side of it, not just the trial like the jurors are. But nonetheless, I don't think this is going to be as easy as perhaps people who have their convictions would assume it to be.
Yeah, and I think also one of the things, the benefits that we have as from covering this as the media, but then also like you at home as viewers as well too, that the jurors don't have. And this is not necessarily like a swaying element to it. It's not like there was some smoking gun, and I mean that in a metaphorical sense, revealed in any of these sidebar conversations. But I do think that one of the things that we benefit from is being able to report on those very key sidebar questions, sort of the framing of questions. Because I have to imagine jurors are wondering, why are the questions being framed this way, right? Remember, they're not privy to a lot of these conversations that are going on between the judge and the defense and prosecution. Sometimes they will have sequestered the jury and so forth. So,
and this trial in particular, if I may add, has a lot of that,
Mm-hmm.
because we're hearing that we see both the prosecution and the defense want to take the case in certain areas that the judge has not allowed. It is circumstantial. So when it comes to potential theories, when it comes to suggestions over what could possibly happen, we're operating in such a gray area where oftentimes we do need to see the judge interject and kind of dictate how these questions are being done, because this, again, no body. This is not as clean cut of a case for both the prosecution and the defense as it would be if that was the case. So a very interesting, of course, you also mentioned the more emotional moments where we've seen the jury either A, be excused, or B, again, getting that guidance as to how are you supposed to frame these potential outbursts, these moments of raw, unfiltered emotions. It's incredibly unique.
It is indeed. So as we said, the prosecution rested on Tuesday. The defense finished up just yesterday. Closing arguments, again, set to start next week. Our Jenny Day has more on that final day there from the defense, their last of the witnesses that they called up. Remember, just 1 day. Take a listen.
Let me start with the latest. Larry, in his own words, confirming he will not testify. Now, the prosecution took about 6 weeks to present their case, calling 67 witnesses total. The defense took today and today alone, starting with 2 volunteer dog handlers who have been assisting the sheriff's department find missing people, dead or alive, since 1994. Day 26 of the Larry Millete murder trial provided testimony from these 2 canine handlers who have dogs trained to detect human remains. They searched the Millete home, garage, and backyard 16 days after Maya disappeared and testified there were no hits, no evidence of human remains. Prosecutors argued the dogs are only trained to find bodies, even a drop of blood or buried bones, but not solely the scent of decomposition. For example, if a body is moved, the dogs might not solely pick up the smell. The defense also called a private investigator to testify, who said he analyzed every camera in the neighborhood just a few months ago, so 5 years later, and conducted an experiment to see if someone could enter or leave the Millete home without being captured on camera. He says it's possible, but would have required Maya to jump over her backyard fence and walk through a drainage ditch, possibly, though, leaving on her own free will. The prosecutor's case has always been that Maya wanted a divorce. She was having an affair, so Larry killed her, possibly shot or poisoned, then dumped her body in the desert. The defense again saying today there is no evidence a murder has even occurred. No blood, still no body, and no solid surveillance video showing where the accused killer went for 12 hours without his phone the day after prosecutors say Maya was killed. Much of the case is circumstantial. Thousands of spells cast showing Larry desperate to save his marriage for months, then none the day after she went missing. Friends testifying about his control and Maya's plans to divorce, phone records, internet searches, her credit card found in the backyard fire pit, but no actual smoking gun. Yeah, both the prosecution and the defense are done. Closing arguments will be on Tuesday. Again, Larry will not testify in his own defense, and then we will soon have a verdict. And I'll say it again, both Larry and Maya's sides of the family are here in court every single day. In Chula Vista, Jenny Day, News 8.
Okay, and correction there. This was Wednesday. Thursday, of course, no court. Today, obviously, no court. There has been no court here on Fridays here for the Larry Millete trial. So, Jenny, let's go ahead and kind of unpack everything that you had there in your latest report. So the defense, only 1 day. We had heard maybe 3 days.
Yeah.
Were you sort of surprised that at the end that it was the end?
You know, we've been covering this now. We're heading into week 8 of this, and they had told us that it could be close to 3 months. And so, you know, it's been fascinating to see our judicial system. As you said before, like what evidence can and cannot be presented, really, you know, striving to make it a fair trial. But yeah, I mean, 67 witnesses and nearly 6 weeks for prosecutors, and then 1 day and 3 witnesses for the defense, laying out their case, really just saying, hey, there's no evidence that a murder has even occurred. They had two of the dogs who are trained to sniff out human remains, and they said that they never got a hit. They searched the backyard, garage, and home, not once. You know, were they able to detect anything? And so the defense is saying, hey, a murder has not occurred. And then again, also arguing that there is a possibility that she could have left on her own free will.
Now, I want to know, though, and it's hard to put yourself in the mind of any of these attorneys, prosecution or defense. Was this a case of, at least again, in your own interpretation, that they are so confident in the cross-examination that they performed during the prosecution's case? Or is this there's not really a whole lot we can do? Like, I guess body language, tone. Did they seem confident only having 3 witnesses?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I will say that. Yeah. Absolutely. I think that they were made it short intentionally to say there's nothing to see here. Kind of approach to it. You know, and I will say something that came out during court when the jurors were not present. It's called a 402 hearing. So again, jurors were not present. they walked through all of the testimony with these canine dog handlers before jurors were present, literally kind of like a mock trial where the judge was going to say, okay, we can use this, can't use this. And they got much deeper into questioning when the jurors were not present, because again, the judge had to rule if they could or could not use that in front of them. But it was so interesting because the dogs actually also sniffed the car that the prosecutors are alleging that that had Maya's body, and that Larry drove it and dumped her body in the desert. And the dogs are not trained to sniff a vehicle.
Yeah.
And so he excluded that testimony. There was also so much talk, again, that the jurors never even heard about decomposition. And I feel so much for the family. You're sitting there as people are arguing about the level of decomposition that your family member was in. I always try to like recenter myself and say, hey, this is actually this mother who is deeply missed by so many. But they were, they didn't have someone to solidly testify. Does decomposition begin immediately when you die, or does it take, maybe even prosecutors said, maybe even 3 to 10 days? Yeah. And so that's why they had to exclude that testimony. And I think they did just say, okay, fine, we're going to say that the dogs did not get a hit on anything, the end.
Yeah, you mentioned what they were trained and not trained in. The term that you have in your notes is residual scent detection.
Yes.
That is the odor that is left after a body is removed. You just told Chris that you felt that the defense felt confident at that point. Do you think that the exclusion of this testimony, in your interpretation, of course, because we want to ask these questions, and we don't want to necessarily lean one side or the other in any way, shape, or form, but it's important to kind of get that emotional context to it. Did you feel like that was perhaps a hit on the defense of, did that hamper them during today, or sorry, not today.
It's okay.
During
it's
Wednesday's
recent, yes.
proceedings, was that the sense that you got there, or did they seem necessarily unfazed by that?
There's been so much back and forth with the prosecution and defense. You've heard, the judge even scolded them at one point, saying like, no, it's so inappropriate to roll your eyes. They scoff. I think there's just a lot of passion on both sides. I remember day one when Maya's dad broke down and was crying on the stand, and the defense attorney, even herself, got emotional, saying, hey, Larry is entitled to a fair trial. And so, and then the prosecution obviously feels very strongly that he killed this missing Chula Vista mom. So it has been a very tense courtroom. Both sides, Maya and Larry's sides of the family, are there every single day, with so many people just wanting truth.
Do you think that with closing arguments scheduled, that emotion is only going to intensify potentially, or I mean, because closing arguments, oftentimes opening statements, closing arguments are oftentimes seen as the sort of primary events, if you will, prior to the jury reading of the verdict.
Yeah, kind of like buttoning up the case, like putting a bow on everything. And I think it's been hard for prosecutors because things have, and the defense, things have been excluded on both sides where they would have liked to be able to present or say certain things or ask a question in a certain way, but it wasn't allowed. And again, like, we were even saying previously, like they do not know how, or even again, if she is dead, they have only suggested to jurors that, perhaps she was shot. We heard neighborhood surveillance, loud bangs. There was a vial of a poisonous plant detected in the home. Okay, was she poisoned? But they cannot outright say that because there is no proof of it. You guys know the video surveillance from when Larry says he went to the beach the day after that prosecutors say she was killed. They requested video surveillance 7 months after she went missing to collect surveillance. It's only a suggestion or their theory that he went to the desert. So, it'll be a tough case, and I feel for all involved.
Yeah, I would. So we have a long weekend before we
Yeah.
get the closing arguments and the jury instruction. Oftentimes, this is very much a formality in a trial when it, in a juror trial. But I think it's especially important to kind of break down this concept because of just how intense the media coverage has been of this one in particular here. What are the jurors allowed to do? What are they not allowed to do? What do we know? It correct me if I'm wrong. Is there someone who's planning to go near some of the locations that were mentioned during the trial? What are the circumstances heading into the weekend?
And circumstantially, by the way.
Yes.
Like not on purpose.
Yes, that's very important to make clear. Yeah.
So Monday, that is when jurors will not be present because you're right. There is one juror who we've almost there are some light moments in court where they're handing out candy or the jurors talking about that it's his birthday and he's going to the Grand Canyon. And again, there are points in this case that have been made that Larry may have circled back to where he allegedly dumped the body and that he on a trip to the Grand Canyon with his children, and literally that came up in court that, the judge said, do not do your own investigation, do not talk about this case. Every single time we're excused for even a break, the judge reminds jurors that, not to talk to each other about it, not to, make any preconceived, ideas prior to them deliberating. So Monday, jurors will not be present. Both attorneys will be there to talk with the judge about jury instructions. And then closing arguments Tuesday. And then we are closer than ever to a verdict. And you're right, back to jurors. They, will be given instructions that it could be premeditated first-degree murder, it could be second-degree, and decrease down and down and down all the way to not guilty. And so, they will be given those instructions on how to make those decisions. They have hours of testimony, hundreds, thousands of pages of documents to consider.
You got to feel so bad for that juror because everything about the Grand Canyon, this was very recent stuff that was just brought into this trial. So a very recent development, roughly a week ago, to where we really started to hear about this idea. So you got to feel for that, where you have a vacation and all of a sudden the trial is something that you have to consider.
Yeah.
So.
What a civic duty, though. Again,
of course,
I have respect for the system. It's just been interesting to see how we function, and again, he's entitled to take a trip for his birthday and doing a good job as, again, his civic duty, and but it's interesting, and we just all want justice and the truth.
Okay, so let's run through. I know we may have already, but before we let you go, the dates that we are looking forward to next week.
So Monday will just be, the public is welcome to be there, but it's the prosecution and the defense chatting with the judge about jury instructions, what they will be told, what they can consider as far as charges go, and then Tuesday, 9 a.m., closing arguments begin. And I think that both sides will rest on Tuesday. What do I know? But I just think that they will, wrap up their points. I don't see it extending several days, possibly two. Maybe they each get one day, and then jury deliberations. You guys know it could be 2 hours to 2 days, 2 weeks even.
We were just talking about that before you came into the studio, that it kind of is anyone's guess. We don't think it's a clear-cut case. We think that there's going to be some pretty heated discussions there as they're deliberating. But in terms of how long those heated discussions are going to take, truly, who knows?
I think what's also interesting, too, is that it really, I think whenever you have these high-profile cases, people finally start to realize that the courtroom scenes that you see play out in Hollywood are oftentimes not the courtroom scenes that you see play out.
Yeah, this isn't 12 Angry Men.
Like opening statements and closing statements are oftentimes not, being screamed and yelled at, and many times don't have these sort of, metaphorical, points and all this stuff like that. They're very direct. Sometimes they're very dry. Sometimes there's an appeal to emotion and so forth like that. But the other thing about it, too, is, though, another reminder, we asked to tape closing arguments and we were denied. So that's the other thing, too. We won't be hearing them unless you decide to go in public, and good luck getting a seat.
I will take frantic notes for you, do our very best, but you're right. I always respect anyone's decision, but the judge did deny. We certainly tried as a station, as a supporter of journalism, to be there to record these statements. But the next possibility, if convicted, would be for sentencing. But we shall see what happens.
All right. Well, Jenny, thank you so much for joining us here this morning.